What's up, guys? New World Econ here. Did Zelensky from Ukraine, along with NATO officials from the Baltic states, lie to the world about the missile strike within Poland? This is a reaction video to a news segment coming from Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar. If you don't watch it, it's actually a very good show. It's very well balanced. Sagar is kind of a little bit on the libertarian end of the spectrum, and then Crystal has definitely got like a working class old democratic attitude. So they bring, I think, like the best opinions from both left and right. The show is actually run by them. It's not a corporation, so this is, I mean, all around, I think it's a great show. This is a reaction to a video they did on the responses that NATO officials along with Zelensky had after the missile strike in Poland. I think it's very good. We're going to go through it and talk about it.
Well, this entire thing was a complete cluster and has dramatically and should dramatically decrease much of your faith in the immediate information that was put out by the Ukrainians and by many of the NATO Baltic states, not including Poland. First and foremost was Zelensky, who seized on the immediate information, or the immediate aftermath of the...
I think that's an important point. He mentions it several times throughout the video. The Baltic states, along with Poland, have noticeably been very bellicose since the start of the Ukraine conflict. These are the countries in NATO that are lobbying hardest for support for Ukraine. They are close to Russia. They actually all border Russia in one way or another. They're not friendly with Russia, so the way they see the conflict is if the sooner Russia loses and Russian power is reduced, the safer their countries are. So they've taken on a very proactive attitude to the entire war. So it's actually very surprising and very important to note. All credit to the Polish government that they were actually not involved in this, basically this shenanigans here.
The blast to call for increased NATO intervention into Ukraine. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is the very first statement that he made. Quote, "Terror is not limited to our national borders. Russian missiles hit Poland, NATO territory. This is a Russian missile attack on collective security, a very significant escalation. We must act."
Small tangent here, and I have to do this a lot too, and I don't like, I wish there was an easier way, and now that Twitter is under new management, maybe there will be an easier way, but who the hell is Tom Elliott? Why can't we quote Zelensky directly here? I don't know, maybe he's an authority figure. I've never heard of him, but we're taking, just the way I see this is this is a secondhand source of what someone said. This is what Zelensky said, but I feel like they should try to get the real source.
Because in a way, you can say, okay, Zelensky, he's always trying to draw the U.S. in. He's just doing what he wants. But here you have the Ukrainian foreign minister. This is the very first immediate response on the attack or on what happened in Poland. He says, quote, "Russia now promotes a conspiracy theory. It was allegedly a missile of Ukrainian air defense that fell on the Polish theory, which is not true. No one should buy Russian propaganda or amplify its messages. This lesson should have been long learned since the downing of MH17. Now, look, he's not wrong. The Russian...
Now, listen, Kuleba, I don't really use Kuleba as a source either. And I believe they cover this later in the video. Ukraine is a country at war. They're under siege. They're going to say what they have to say that's best for Ukraine. So, I don't, blame people like Kuleba, for taking on this kind of attitude. But, obviously the statement's complete bullshit. It's been proven 10 ways to Sunday at this point that it was a Ukrainian S-300 missile. But, they have every reason to try and drag friends into the conflict, for more assistance, of course, and more help on the front lines.
Russians are liars on MH17 and have been liars for a long time. But it is on you to provide accurate information, unless your aim is to draw the United States and NATO and to escalate the situation further. And unfortunately, our NATO so-called allies in the Baltics, they were very willing to jump on the same bandwagon. Let's go ahead and put this up there. Here you have Slovakia. Here you have a NATO defense minister saying, quote, "I am very concerned by Russian missiles dropping in Poland. Russia must explain what happened. Senseless attacks on infrastructure must stop. Russia's recklessness is getting out of hand. We will be in close contact and allies to coordinate a response. Let's go ahead and throw the next one up there because, again, it just underscores. Here you have Latvia's defense minister saying, quote, criminal Russian regime fired missiles which target not only Ukrainian civilians, but also landed on NATO territory in Poland.
It's a heavily propagandized statement.
What you said, Crystal, underscoring the Associated Press's role in all of this. Go and put this on the screen. How a lightly sourced AP story almost set off World War III. That deadly explosion showed that the AP was willing to run on a single attribution source of a U.S. official, claiming that this was a Russian missile, only hours later to be contradicted by the President of the United States. Now, people may say, Crystal, Saga, you guys are exaggerating. You know, a specific incident wasn't going to lead to World War III.
So, like, the counterpoint there, I mean, and he, you know, I think he agrees with this, but I like, so the argument that this wouldn't have led to World War III, which is something I mentioned in a video, I believe last week, is that, you know, it probably would have been seen as an accident. The missile is undeniably an S-300, or even if it was, like, say, an X-101 or a Kalibr cruise missile, there's no way the Russians intentionally targeted a tractor on a farm, right? So, like, you know, it was a misfire, you know, bad coordinates. It was so close to the border anyways. It's likely that, you know, the leaders of various different countries would have been like, all right, like, obviously this isn't an intentional attack. This is not worth going to war, especially a war that would potentially turn into a nuclear conflict. However, there are elements within different governments and especially populations that can be angered by such an incident. Like, say, you know, if you're Polish and you know, Russian military killed 2 Poles on Polish land, you're going to feel some kind of way about it, right? So what would probably happen is the, you know, American and Russian governments would be talking behind the scenes, where America would basically try and twist their arm to force a apology of some sort, and maybe even like some kind of temporary ceasefire. Like, that's the alternative to war, and it's a much better alternative to war. You know, I don't expect any kind of war between Russia and NATO would actually culminate in any kind of battlefield form. It would probably turn nuclear pretty quick. So, you know, and that's against everyone's best interests. So, you know, in that case, it's like, you know, yeah, we'll just apologize and you know, lay low, cool down for a bit. But there's always the possibility that, you know, you have, like say, if Poland, you know, to their credit, they've actually, you know, taken a different path here. But if they wanted to act real bellicose about it as well, they could issue an ultimatum to Russia and say, you know, cease activities in Ukraine immediately. This is spilled over onto our borders, or we're going to come in and join, and we're going to drag NATO in. So, you know, thank goodness that didn't happen. But I think that's basically what he's getting at.
I don't think that's what we're claiming at all. What we're saying is that was a real jump-off point.
Yeah.
It could have been one of those things where it's like, okay, now we're going. Let's say Poland issued an ultimatum. Ultimatums have never led to war in Europe, specifically in Europe. When over 1 or 2 people were killed, right? That's never happened before in history. The point is that whenever you unleash that level of uncertainty and bad information, it was clear in this instance that the Ukrainians and many of the Baltic states, barring both Poland and Estonia, I'll give them credit, they never actually said it was Russia.
Yeah, very surprising Estonia stayed out of it too.
2 NATO allies and Ukraine, our ostensible ally in this situation, who straight up lied about what happened, or at the very least did not have complete information and put out propaganda instead to draw the United States and its allies into this war.
And Zelensky, in spite of the fact that you now have Poland, the US, and NATO saying, this looks like it was Ukrainian missile defense, and that is very unlikely this came from Russia. There is no evidence to suggest that it did. He is sticking to his story.
Yeah.
I mean, he is straight out saying know it was not us. I, promise you it was not us. It was definitely Russia. So, I mean, this is an extraordinary...
Like, why? Well, what is the point, though? Like, you have all your allies and all your friends that have come out and basically said, we have evidence. It's an S-300 missile. Russia's out of range. It had to be a Ukrainian missile. And they're not saying that, like, it's Ukraine's fault. And I believe they go over this in a moment. But, like, basically all the allies are like, we understand that Ukraine was actively enduring a missile attack and had to try and shoot down those missiles, had to try and defend itself. So, no one morally blames Ukraine, so it's like, we're not blaming you, but yet still Zelensky comes out and says what he says. If you actually watch the actual statement, there's like video of him at a conference table making the statement. He's like very conspiratorial and pushing blame off on he basically claims that Poland and the U.S. is lying. He's like, they say it's an S-300 missile. Why won't you give me the proof? And like, he's acting like they're withholding evidence from him, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, the U.S. and various different neighboring countries have supplied enormous amounts of support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, and even support that was never actually promised in the beginning, like armored vehicles, for example. Like, there were so many statements before the war started in the beginning of the war that there wouldn't be any kind of tanks or anything supplied from NATO country. Yet, like, we have supplied, nearly 400 tanks to Ukraine and thousands, like over 3,000 various different kinds of like infantry fighting vehicles and armored trucks and stuff. So, I mean, enormous support has been sent to Ukraine, and he basically calls Joe Biden and the Polish president a liar on TV. So when the evidence, it basically confirms that he's the one that's lying, but he keeps it up. But like we said, he's the president of a country under siege. So, I mean, it's kind of expected, but still, like, this should kind of tell you that, like, you can't really trust everything you hear out of Ukraine. I mean, morally, yes, they're the ones under attack, you have to try and give them the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, like, propaganda is absolutely necessary to win any war. Every country has propaganda. The Russians put out propaganda now, to influence their population and their troops. The Ukrainians put out propaganda to keep spirits high. The U.S. put out propaganda in World War II and World War I. That's the whole Uncle Sam wants you, like, even in the Civil War, like, if you think about the South, like, the vast majority, the Civil War was about, slavery or whatever. The vast majority of the soldiers were poor. They had to endure some kind of propaganda in order to enter the fight in the first place, because like, they obviously weren't fighting for slavery. Like, none of them owned slaves. Like, that's a little bit of a tangent, but like, the point is, propaganda is and always will be prevalent in every war scenario. So that's not like the issue. The issue is, basically, publicly mistreating your friends, and Joe Biden and the Polish president.
Dangerous situation in and of itself, but I think the thing it really, really reveals is how many actors are looking for any justification to try to pull us further into this conflict. And, over at Responsible Statecraft, they had a number of examples. So before anyone really knew what had happened here, you had prominent journalists, as you were pointing out, lawmakers, jumping in to say, all right, it's time to think about Article 5. I mean, people were literally saying that at 2:10 p.m., a Ukrainian journalist with a significant following in the West tweeted, so, Article 5? She softened her comment about 20 minutes later, calling on concerned parties to wait for official information, but they say a member of Ukraine's parliament had no such compunction. The lawmaker simply tweeted out the phrase Article 5 at 2:29 p.m., adding later that Putin was, quote, testing the limits with the strikes and that reaction equals appeasement. Another prominent American supporter of Ukraine and member of the U.S. Helsinki Commission, Paul Massaro, said
this
around
word
the same
appeasement, time, like appeasement to me is probably one of the most annoying words in the English language, and I blame this completely on like modern liberals and like basically newspeak. Like this word appeasement like goes around so much and everything. Like, oh, you're appeasing this and you're appeasing that, and it's like, they treat the world like it's binary, and if like you have, or it's like a binary word. Like if you have an opinion or something that's in line with something to someone else, then you're with them. So like if you're like, oh, this war in Ukraine's bad, hundreds of thousands of people dying, we need to, get a ceasefire and an end to it, like that benefits Russia, so you're appeasing Putin. Like it's such an annoying like phrase, and I'm not criticizing her. She's just basically reciting what other people say, but like it's we'll get back
Russian
to it.
terrorism had reached Poland, adding shortly after that it was, quote, hard to believe this was an accident. So when you have journalists, prominent lawmakers, NATO allies, all jumping to conclusions and implying we ought to be thinking about Article 5 here before you have even, an hour to see any sort of confirmation of what actually happened.
And that's a crazy statement that she just went through as well, which I know I paused in the middle. I'm going to go back just a little bit, but
Shortly after that it was, quote, hard to believe this was an accident.
Hard to believe it was an accident. A missile strikes a freaking farm and hits a tractor, and it's hard to believe that it was an accident. So we're targeting Polish tractors now. Like that's the Russian agenda, is destroying, wasting multi-million-dollar missiles on Polish tractors. Like if it was a Russian missile, it was obviously an accident. That was, they would never target a freaking farm tractor, in a border town. And there's no evidence that it was even a Russian missile at this point.
So when you have journalists, prominent lawmakers, NATO allies, all jumping to conclusions and implying we ought to be thinking about Article 5 here before you have even, an hour to see any sort of confirmation of what actually happened. It just really reveals what their game is. And also with whoever this U.S. official that leaked this to the AP, like clearly they're playing their own game here as well.
Yeah, look, it's incredibly irresponsible. And this gets to the point where whenever you have major national security information being confirmed on background and all this other nonsense, it needs to end as authoritative. And I think all of us have to play a role in this. At this point, when you have a major international incident and you just have some by the way, what does U.S. official even mean? This is what I used to do this as well. And
for real.
We had to try and take great care to describe like a senior administration official, a senior White House official, a person close to Donald Trump. U.S. official could mean, like a sergeant in the Pentagon, or it could mean the Secretary of State. It's one of those where we genuinely have no
or just
idea.
a government
And the fact
employee.
that the AP
They'll
chose to
quote
run with it.
anyone
and
these
then
days.
Furthermore, that so many people in the American press who have just been agitating for escalation were willing to run with it too, without any information, without waiting for time. I mean, in a way, you can almost expect those people to do that. It is Ukraine and the defense ministers of Latvia and of Slovakia who are pretty much unforgivable here. The Ukrainian government, once again, I get it. It's their responsibility to look out for their interests. But maybe we should learn then that their interests can diverge a little bit from our own interests. And that's part of the problem in American political discourse. If you say that, you're a Russian plant. I mean, it's not a Russian plant. We're saying, yeah, I hope Ukraine wins. I hope they continue to keep up the good fight. But I don't want any part of this war in Ukraine. Same whenever you have the Latvians, willing to just so immediately say criminal Russian missiles, all of that. Look, if it was, everybody would condemn it. Nothing is hurt to the NATO countries to just wait 12 hours. And I think the Poles' immediate response should be applauded here. As you said, even though they are as hawkish as they come.
So what he was getting at, with the propaganda thing, there's or just wanting what's best for America, and it can't be it's always construed if it's not pro-Ukrainian that it's pro-Russian, and it's there's people in America that disagree and think that our involvement is not good for America, so this is the difference between pro-U.S. propaganda, pro-Ukraine propaganda, pro-Russian propaganda. I think they quoted this Paul Massaro at one point, or Massaro, I don't know what his name is. He's on Twitter. He's an American, but like basically, if you go through his Twitter, it's like purely like pro-Ukrainian propaganda. It's all about like how America needs to join the war and stuff, and it's like that's obviously not in America's best interest. Like on either side of the political spectrum, whether you're liberal or conservative, or if you're a leftist socialist or a libertarian, how many actual politicians are there in America that are actively saying that we need to join the war on either side? It's basically zero. The very, very, very few are on that boat. Like the president is not on that boat. Like no one is on that boat. The Democratic Party right now is like, their position is we need to support Ukraine, with material support because it hurts Russia, right? And then elements of the Republican Party agree with that, along with, their connections. And then, of course, Democratic connections to the defense industry. This is all very good for the defense industry. And then on top of that, you have, a small subset of the Republican Party, basically populists and libertarians that want to reduce the funding because of ideological issues on government spending. That's basically what America's position is. Listening to all these other people, listening to Latvian foreign ministers and Slovakian foreign ministers and Ukrainian foreign ministers about what America should do, for situations is it's annoying that we allow these people to have such a megaphone in American politics. And that's one of the problems with social media in general, I guess. And it's, if people follow these people, then they follow these people. But if you have multiple people from foreign countries on Twitter or Facebook or whatever saying America needs to come to war right now, that's trying to influence internal American politics. And I just, it's not best for us. I don't agree with it. But I guess it's expected in a free speech society.
They were like, we're convening a National Security Council. We're going to look at all the information. We'll let you guys know what we find. They did not leak anything about Russia, all of that. They held that. They said maybe we'll do Article 4 if it does turn out to be Russia, but we're going to come out and have the information. The Polish president immediately called the NATO Secretary General, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of the UK, the two most powerful countries inside of NATO, and also the NATO Secretary General. And then they all
I would suggest Turkey's probably got a little more military power than
not blaming Ukraine. They have the right to defend themselves. It was a bad
arguably UK has more global political power.
Well, and Zelensky needs to be a little careful here because he is completely dependent on the U.S. in particular, but the West and NATO in general for the continued existence of his administration, for economic support, and obviously for the weapons that we have been providing in mass quantities to him. And there's actually a NATO country diplomat who told the Financial Times, quote, "This is getting ridiculous. The Ukrainians are destroying our confidence in them. Nobody is blaming Ukraine, and they are openly lying. This is more destructive than the missile." That is from a diplomat from a NATO country saying he is really misstepping here and just out and out lying to try to, bolster his own desire to draw countries more directly into this war. So, it's a very revealing incident. That's what I'll say, from the press, from some of these diplomats, from Zelensky himself, from some of the countries, from some of the journalists who wanted to push an agenda that they have long had.
Yeah, look, keep this in mind. The next time some ambiguous stuff pops up in Ukraine, I'm not going to believe Zelensky. The very first thing he says, I'm going to wait.
I haven't for a long time, buddy.
Comes to line.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024.
So there you have it. Basically, what I take from that is, I get it. If you don't trust the Russians, you don't trust the Russians. Everyone has good reason to not trust the Russians. But that doesn't mean that you should automatically trust the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians obviously lied too. I would argue that this part of the world, this post-Soviet space, everyone's got that post-communist attitude. All these countries are corrupt. all these countries are basically doing what's in their best interest, like, why believe what any of them say? Why believe what Russia says? Why believe what Ukraine says? Why believe what freaking Latvia or Poland says? You know, like, I mean, that's just my position on it. All right, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like Breaking Points? Have you ever seen Breaking Points? Do you want to see more of these reaction videos? Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.